Welcome to our newest adventure for first responder wellness. No one fights alone. In-depth conversations about mental health and culture in the first responder space. We're joined by your co-hosts Austin Pedersen and Brad Shepard.
Welcome to the No One Fights Alone podcast. I'm Brad Shepard alongside my partner and co-host Austin Pedersen. This podcast is here to have in-depth conversations about the challenges faced by those brave men and women who serve our communities. How you doing, Austin?
No, I'm good. I'm super excited for today's episode. I think this is going to be just an amazing resource for people. We've talked about a little bit about what we're going to do before this, and I was able to gain some knowledge on a few things. And if even working in wellness, if I didn't know about some of these resources and options, I think that the general public isn't going to know. And so I think it's a great opportunity for people to hear about different options for themselves and their loved ones.
You know what? I feel the same way. I'm just super excited about the conversation today because two things. There's some great information fixing to come out, but this is a great friend of mine. I've known Shelly for a really long time and got to work alongside of her. She's just the best. She's just a great human. But she's going to bring some information to bear today that I think is really going to be so beneficial to the listeners out there. That some relevant things to a really difficult topic, but also some things nationally that have happened this last year. So I'm excited to bring her on. Let's get her on here. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Shelly Jones, how are you?
Hi, Brad. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me today.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. Shelly Jones is a great friend of mine. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Survivors of Blue Suicide National Nonprofit Organization. And she's was also the former director of operations for National Concerns of Police Survivors. She was the assistant chief, now retired from Columbia, Missouri, Columbia PD. And one of the most awesome badass pieces of Shelly is she was a motors jock back in the day. Isn't that right, Shelly?
I was. Best job in the world. Yes.
Best job in the world.
I wish I could have done 21 years of my career on that motor.
That is awesome. You still ride, don't you? Do you still ride?
I do. It's not as much fun without red and blue lights and sirens, but it's still it's a good time and it's relaxing, and it's actually one of those things that you can do to relax and do the mindfulness stuff on.
Oh, that's so great. Well, Shelly, you have a pretty interesting story. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and also tell us a little bit about some of that difficult journey. I know you've had some pretty crazy things happen in your career. What drives you? What makes you up? And what drives you to do what you're doing?
In 2005, we lost Officer Molly Thomas Bowden in the line of duty. She was killed and shot by a bad guy, obviously. And 2 years later, we lost Michael Goldberg to suicide. And I noticed the significant difference in how the department handled the officer who was feloniously killed versus the officer who died by suicide. And that always bothered me. And I even had a conversation with our chief of police at the time and said, I'm not understanding why we're doing this differently. This was an officer. And he explained that suicide was not line of duty and that they didn't do all the same pomp and circumstance for suicides that they do for line of duty. I have talked with Michael's widow, and she said the department treated her very well. So she has no hard feelings about that the circumstances surrounding the department's interaction with her. But I was bothered by that. And I was given the opportunity through Concerns of Police Survivors to start helping the families of suicide. There was very little help out there for them, very little. And The generous hearts of the COPS National Board voted to help start a new but separate organization, which was later called Survivors of Blue Suicide. And I look at my history in law enforcement. At a 2.5-year officer, I was shot at point blank range with a 12 gauge shotgun in the chest. And that is a career changer. It could have taken me in two different directions, obviously, and I chose not to let it destroy my career or my life. And that was a conscious choice that I made because I worked too hard to become a police officer, and for some dirtbag to destroy that for me, it was not going to happen. So, and one of the things that I look at back at that is, the department sent me through EAP. And the woman I spoke to was probably crazier than I could ever be. And she didn't understand law enforcement. She didn't understand the traumas of law enforcement. And so now I am a huge advocate for making sure departments, when they send their folks to counselors or to EAP, that the professionals that they send them to are competent and understand trauma, and they understand the law enforcement family and law enforcement psychology. Because I look at all of them and I think, but for the grace of God goeth I.
And so have you seen that improve since you experienced somebody who was not culturally competent? I mean, have you seen that improve over the last, decade or so with the departments hiring more culturally competent therapists?
Yes. It's a slow process. It's very slow, but there's a significant difference from 1996 to today. And I think agencies are starting to recognize and that they need to hire culturally competent professionals. And I think they're focusing more on officer wellness. And there's a huge difference today from what there was in 1993.
Wow, Shelley, that's incredible, and thanks for sharing your story. I'm going to segue us into Survivors of Blue Suicide here for time purposes, because I really want to spend some time talking about that and let you share with us how valuable that organization is. What does it do? What makes up Survivors of Blue Suicide, and what do you do?
Well, we work with families and coworkers of officers who die by suicide. Our mission is to foster hope by uniting survivors of law enforcement suicide with one another and honor our fallen heroes. Because we recognize that the officers who die by suicide are our heroes. The job broke them, and we need to recognize that. And we started in May of 2020, but we went live with the organization in August, end of July, beginning of August of 2020. And for those who remember, that was the year of COVID. It literally broke in March of 2020, and we started this in May of 2020. So the first year we couldn't have retreats because of obviously COVID. And then, so the second year we held retreats. We held one for spouses and parents. And then the next year we held one for coworkers, spouses, and parents. And the impact that those retreats had was amazing. We had officers that attended the coworkers, and we got comments back of, "You saved my life. This retreat saved my life. I was on the verge and you gave me hope." And we got that from the spouses and from the parents. And taking care of the families is just important as taking care of the coworkers. Because if we don't take care of all of them, there's a good chance we could have more suicides. And so we have to take very good care of them and provide them with the resources and SBS provides them with resources. We also tell them, when I go to conferences, I make sure that they know if they're not comfortable talking to someone they have access to, all they have to do is reach out to us, and we will connect them with someone, and it will remain confidential. Um, and I don't even know what gets said after I make that initial connection. I don't know how many times they connect. And so um, they have that confidentiality, because to me, the more important thing is them getting help than somebody knowing they're getting help. And
No,
so,
absolutely. That's huge. That is huge. I mean, I feel like over the last couple of years, retreats have become more of a socially acceptable, thing to go do, especially in the first responder world. I mean, can you give us an idea, first off, like maybe locations, not exact, but statewide locations, what they're in, how they can go about looking into attending some of these retreats, and then maybe a little bit about what they're trying to work through there. Is there are you guys doing like group therapy, or is it's more of just kind of a get together to have a little fun, kind of going a little bit further about those retreats?
absolutely. Um, they arrive on a Friday and they leave on a Monday morning, and basically they begin the retreat on Saturday morning. They attend. For coworkers, we call it a debriefing. For families, we call it a facilitated conversation. There is a mental health professional that sits in the debriefings, and we try to keep them like 10 or less, so that everyone has the opportunity to speak and to tell their story. Nobody's forced to tell their story, but I have found that when one starts, it eventually leads everyone else to want to tell their story. And during those sessions, they learn that they're not alone. They learn that a lot of what they're going through, there's a lot of other people going through that same thing. And so then after that, we do a fun activity, um, something that is challenging. And to find challenging thing for coworkers is not the easiest thing to do. But we do something fun and challenging, and then we also have breakout sessions. And we ask them before they attend what they would like to hear about. And if we don't get any responses, we then go to our mental health professionals and let them decide what the breakout sessions should be. And so they try to do a variety of things so that um, they not only get the debriefing, but they get some tools to take home with them on how to manage that grief and how to manage the stress of the job and how to ask for help when they get home. Because this is a weekend, and although it changes lives, it doesn't make everything perfect in their world. So we give them tools to take home and resources. And then the next day they attend more breakout sessions, and then they do more group activities, and then they do fun physical activities. And in the evenings, they play games, they sit around, they talk, they chat. And the thing for coworkers is it's a trusted environment. If an
Yeah.
agency
Safe.
calls
It's really
and
safe.
says, yes, it's very safe. And if an agency calls and said, hey, did my officer attend this retreat? We're going to say, we have no idea. Unless that officer
Right.
tells us it's okay to let their department know that they attended, we're not going to share that information with anyone. We take pictures and we send it to them. But our sponsors of that program understand we can't show their faces because of the confidentiality of the coworkers. And so all of the retreats are set up in a very similar manner, except the families, we can take pictures and we can share them. It's different for them. But we guarantee those coworkers that we'll never tell anyone they were there unless they give us permission to do so.
I
Now,
know I know you actually set the model. I think you set the model similarly to the Concerns of Police Survivors retreats. I have a pretty serious question related to that. So, at your coworkers retreats, Shelley, do you have arts and crafts?
no, we don't have arts and crafts. We just do physical.
Oh,
Yeah, we don't have that. I know at the cops coworkers, they love the arts and crafts. But because of
Oh my
the
gosh.
law that they love ceramics.
The coworkers retreats at Concerts of Police Survivors. Yeah, they have arts and crafts. I remember attending and thinking this is crazy, and ended up being super fun.
Yes, and they all enjoy it. So, but we're going to talk about the legislation that passed, and because of that legislation, our retreats are changing, and so
Oh wow.
yeah, they're going to be changing a little bit. So, do you want me to talk about the legislation now, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, this would be a
Okay.
good segue. You want to talk about the public safety officer benefit piece?
Yeah. Yes. On August 16th of 2022, President Biden um, passed the SOSA law. It's the Public Safety Officer Support Act of 2022 is what it is. And what that did in short terms, or in condensed terms, is it makes some suicides, if they meet the criteria within the law, line of duty, and makes the families eligible for public safety officers benefits, the PSOBs. And it dates back to January 1 of 2019. So any officer who dies after January 1 of 2019 of suicide, their families are eligible to apply for benefits. Now that's up to the Department of Justice as to whether they'll be granted the benefits, but they're at least eligible to apply. And when that law passed, that made some of these survivors eligible for COPS benefits, for the benefits through Concerns of Police Survivors. And so we sat down, SBS, Lori Putnam and I, we sat down with Diane Bernhardt and the president, and came up with a plan on how to help all of these families, because those who fell before 2019 couldn't apply for the benefits and they weren't eligible for COPS. But we did not want to just say, I'm sorry, you're no longer eligible for benefits, and we can't help you. Because that was the whole reason SBS was started, was because people would call COPS that were families of officers who died by suicide, and they would ask for help. And COPS would have to say, I'm sorry, it doesn't meet our criteria and our bylaws. And so our retreats, because of this legislation, our retreats are going to be co-hosted by COPS and SBS. And we're combining more survivorships to some of the retreats. So every survivorship will have a retreat they can attend that's for suicide only survivors. And so the retreats, if let's say their officer died after January 1 of 2019 and they're awarded benefits, they can continue to go to these retreats, or they will then go to the COPS hands-on programs. Okay. Now, if they get declined by PSOB, they'll continue to go to this retreat, and they'll still stay connected with all those survivors no matter when their end of watch date is. And so nobody has to say no again. So we're going to take care of them, and SBS is still here. We're still functioning. We're still giving the survivors everything that they got before this law was passed through Survivors of Blue Suicide.
This is an incredible legislation piece. I feel like this is incredible. So just to be clear, maybe some listeners out there may not fully understand the gravity of this. If you're not in the profession, if an officer, first responder, completes suicide by taking their own life, the large majority of the time, if not all, they lose all benefits. They don't get, the family will no longer receive insurance. They're not going to get death financial benefits. It is a all stop to everything for a family member. And this has been enormously debilitating to families out there who have been truly the victims of a honorable and noble career that ultimately has, I guess, consumed that first responder with the influx of trauma and overwhelming stress. Am I wrong there, Shelley? Am I getting close?
Yep, that's correct. This law was a huge game changer for suicide survivors. Um, Now that opens it up the door for the PSOB benefits, the federal benefits. It doesn't open the door for all state benefits yet. There's a lot of states, and I can't even begin to tell you which ones, but there's several states out there that are working on changing their laws to mimic the SOSA Act so that these families also get state benefits. And there's also states working on workers' comp, making sure that uh, the families can get the workers' comp that a traditional line of duty death family will receive. So there's a lot of things that came from this law that are moving in the states. It's just going to take time for these states to approve them. Do I see in the future all these states mimicking it? Yes. Do I see some changes? Sure. But I think for the most part, I think these families it's going to continue to grow to help them. This law is so new, we're not sure what or how many families are going to get approved for the benefits in the which gives them then the line of duty death status. We're not sure how many are going to get approved. So we're just kind of sitting back and watching and helping these families apply for those benefits. And we're going to see what happens in the future with the benefits and how many get approved.
Yeah, that's amazing. This is part of this law I didn't know about until Brad had informed me just recently on. I guess there's a two-part question I have. One is this for police only, or is it a first responder, firefighter, EMT, whatever it may be? And then second, have you seen anyone yet accomplish submitting everything and getting those benefits?
Yes, it applies to firefighters, a lot of the first responders, probation officers, corrections officers. So it's not just law enforcement. Even though it's called the Public Safety Officer Support Act, it defines within the law who all it applies to. But yes, there's more than just law enforcement. Um, the legislation has specific wording so that it helps families, and there's a 45-day marker. If it happens before 45 days, there's certain criteria it has to meet. If the trauma happened more than 45 days, there's different criteria that they have to meet. But it opens the door for these families to at least apply, whereas before they didn't. There was nothing for them. Now, I think you had another question in there.
Yeah. Have you seen anyone apply and get those benefits granted yet? Because I know it's so new. So I just wanted to check in on that.
Yes, one. So far, there's been one that applied and has been approved. And that's all right now.
Awesome.
But there is a lot of applications.
That's hope.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. I mean, there's a lot of applications that have been sent in. This law passed so fast that not everyone was ready for this law. And so the Department of Justice is trying to come up with the criteria to make sure that they look at all of them and look at them through the eyes of the legislation, I guess. And so it's going to take a little bit of time, but we're not talking years. Okay, we're talking a few months to get more of these approved. It's just they have to get the information and make sure that they get the right information and ask the right questions. And they're doing a great job of trying to get the message out about this.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at the national FOP news release on one um, determination of the PSOB benefits to completion of suicide. It's actually it's just an enormous win. It's an enormous win to this community. I lost a really good friend to suicide as a retiree. I it was just absolutely devastating to know, and really didn't see it coming. It was hard to see that coming. But I want to circle back, Shelley, to maybe bring back up in a conversation piece. I remember because how you and I met was Concerns of Police Survivors, and love seeing you branch off and see this passion fruition. I'm so proud of you and what you're doing there. But you and I met back in Concerns of Police Survivors days, and we did a lot of great work. We were in the weeds on helping a lot of folks there, and what I found oftentimes was the coworker piece oftentimes was a misunderstood piece as to who can actually be identified as a co-worker of a line of duty death. Are you finding the same with the label of co-worker with survivors of suicide? Because I remember having conversation with officers who say, well, I don't qualify as a co-worker. I didn't work directly with them, on a daily basis. Well, if you were on the same shift or that was impactful to you, you're a coworker, you're a survivor. That's who you are. I remember having a lot of these conversations. Do you find similar? And if you can, maybe kind of define that. If there's people out here maybe having that question and say, I'm not necessarily, I don't qualify. I'm not that person. Can you help us maybe tell the listener who actually can go to these retreats and who can actually participate and maybe talk to that a little bit?
Okay. The funny thing about coworkers is a lot of them don't see themselves as survivors. When we talk about survivors, which is why we separate family and coworkers, because for some reason, coworkers don't consider themselves survivors. And as far as coworkers for SBS, you don't have to work at that same agency. Like for me, when I worked in Columbia, we worked with the county deputies a lot, or the highway patrol, we worked with some. And we would be impacted if something would happen to one of them. That would impact me, even though I wasn't working at the same agency. We worked together. And so that would classify them as a coworker for SBS. Okay. We allowed at our coworkers retreat admin, um, uh, like we had an administrative assistant, um, because she was hugely impacted by the loss of her coworker. She saw this officer every day. She worked with them. We would let dispatchers come in. I think dispatchers so often get forgotten in the commitment that they have. When I got shot and I left the hospital, my friend who was driving me home, I made her take me by the police department, and I went to our dispatch, and I went and I thanked that dispatcher for keeping it together when everything was falling apart. And to this day, she thanks me for that. And I thank her
Wow.
for what she did. They're impacted. They don't get to go and chase bad guys. They have to sit there and listen when someone's screaming for help on the radio. So we let the dispatchers come and attend these retreats as well. Now we will put them in a different session than the officers if we have enough people. But if there's just one, they'll probably attend the one with the officers, because it also gives them the different perspective. It gives them the officer's perspective, but the officer then gets their perspective. So it doesn't have to be somebody who works directly at that agency. And the big thing with suicide is you have to worry about suicide contagions. And it doesn't necessarily mean someone who works in that agency. That agency can can suffer suicide contagions if they don't address and deal with the first suicide with their organization. but someone they've worked with in another agency for like a state trooper, if they're a municipal officer, they can connect with them as well. And so you have to make sure you cover all of them and not just somebody who worked at that agency.
Yeah, that's so great. There's so many intricacies involved in that, and you have such a great staff involved in the survivors of blue suicide. I know quite a few of your staff. Give us a little idea of who those folks are and where they come from. I know they come in from all over the country. You've networked them fabulously. You want to speak to a little bit about the wonderful support personnel for survivors of blue suicide?
Absolutely. We have a survivor advisory council, and we just changed things up a little bit because of the law passage. And so we're trying to let the survivors have a more active role in the managing of survivors of blue suicide instead of it just being Lori Putnam and myself running it. We have these survivors now that have a lot more input, and we literally just changed that about a couple weeks ago. So I don't have a lot of information on how well that's going, but they're a lot of them have already told their story through COPS, traumas of law enforcement trainings. If you've never attended a COPS traumas of law enforcement training, the TLE, I would recommend going. They are amazing. And an SBS survivor presents at the trainings on day 3. And the impact that they have by telling their story to these officers is amazing. Multiple officers have come up to them after they present, and they say, I just want you to know you saved my life. Or I want to thank you. I'm going to go home and apologize to my wife and get some help. Those are the things that they say to them. And so these survivors telling their stories have the hugest impact on officers in the profession, because they look at these families and they think, gee, this could be mine. And they say, when an officer takes their life, it ends one person suffering and it adds 150 people suffering. So the impact that these survivors are having is absolutely amazing.
I was actually looking at some of the numbers on suicide, and they just continue to jaw drop me on. I went back to 2018. 156, in 2019, 196, 2020, 145, and then last year 155. And these are just the ones that are being reported. I remember having a conversation with a couple folks that those are probably pale in comparison to what the true numbers are that are oftentimes unreported because either they don't know how. And I think probably with this legislation change, that'll make an enormous difference as to really having people pull in and say we might actually be jaw dropped even more to know actual numbers. And then you actually start getting into the retiree piece of the amount of retirees that are taking their own life that we don't even know about, and it happens just astronomically high, too high.
Yeah, that's the one that I think is the number that people don't even think about is the retirees, because at least in the mental health field, that's where I'm seeing a lot of people struggles. As soon as they do retire, they don't have that segue into the same type of family feeling that they had while on duty, and they almost suffer in silence. Is that where you're seeing, Shelley, too? Is a lot of struggle is the retirees?
Yeah, it's very tragic because they survived that career, and then I can't tell you how many stories I've heard that officer turns in their papers, retires, and walks out the door. And I mean, even one of them took their own life on the steps of their agency, or they go home and they take their own life. And it's so tragic. And I think law enforcement is starting to recognize that they need to address that, that they need to help them plan for that transition of leaving that agency, help them understand that they have to have a purpose when they leave, because without a purpose, they're taking their lives, because they see as their career's done, their blue family's gone, it's going to fade away, and they don't have that purpose anymore. So before they retire, they need to find that purpose, a second purpose in life. And part of the issue, you were talking about the statistics. Blue Help started doing the statistics, I believe, in 2017. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's when they started. And it's all voluntarily reported to them. So there's some that are being missed. And no fault to anyone other than they're not reporting it. Well, in 2020, President Trump signed the bill requiring the FBI to keep statistics on officer suicide and retired officer suicide and other law enforcement responders. But that's voluntary again. And agencies are very hesitant to provide that information because, one, they want to protect the family, and two, they want to protect the agency. It could be one or the other or both. But we can't adequately address the problem until we know how widespread it is. And so we work with agencies and we encourage agencies to do the reporting. The reports that the FBI will release will not identify any agency or any officer by name or location. So we need these departments to report this so that we can see and get accurate statistics. As hard as Blue Help tries, if somebody doesn't call them and tell them, or they don't see it on the news or something, those fall through the cracks. And that's tragic and sad.
If somebody were to, let's just go down that road for just a little bit. If somebody were to need to report, how would they go about doing that, Shelley? Saying, "Hey, I lost a loved one here, a coworker here. Where do I sign up for that?"
If it's after 2019, they can go to Concerns of Police Survivors website, or if it's before or after 2019, they can go to Survivors of Blue Suicide's website. And you click on the spot where it says, I'm an agency representative, and they can report the officer. And they can also provide us with some information so that we can reach out to the families. Because these families need support. And without these agencies willing to share that family information, it's very difficult to reach them. This law, I think, is going to change that, because now you've got the benefits attached and you've got the line of duty attached. But the stigma and shame is still there. This law doesn't change that. Will it in time? I think it's going to significantly help, yes. But it's going to take a little bit of time for that. So they can report it to either organization. They can reach out to ODMP and they'll make us aware. They can reach out to Blue Help. They keep statistics. They can report it to the FBI. But for us at SBS or cops to help these families, they need to reach out to us. They can reach out to a cops chapter. There's 54 or 55 chapters that they could reach out to, and they'll reach out to us as well. So there's multiple ways. They can go to our website, survivorsofbluesuicide.org, or they can email me at Shelley Jones or Shelley.Jones@nationalcops.org, or Shelley Jones. Wait, I'm sorry, I messed those up. It's Shelley.Jones@nationalsbs.org, or Shelley_Jones@nationalcops.org. Or you can go to our
That's
website
great.
and just click on the email.
That's great information right there. I'm some of this is just heartbreaking conversations, but these are conversations that we have to have. These are conversations that we really have to endeavor to help save a life in the future and those that have been left behind.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely. And it's still, you talked about stigma and shame, and I think you're absolutely right. It's still there. This is such a taboo subject. The word suicide is taboo, realistically. And so it's tough. But I heard a rumor, Shelley, that you guys are putting on a conference. Is that happening?
Concerns of Police Survivors is putting on a conference in 2024. And if you're asking about the Survivors of Blue Suicide Conference that we put on last year in Indianapolis, that one will probably be 2024 as well. We're trying to see what the Department of Justice is going to do with these PSOB benefits, because if all of these folks are able to get benefits, there's a good chance that their name is going to be on the wall and be honored at National Police Week. Okay. And let's be honest, our little event in Indianapolis does not even begin to compare with the honors that they will get in Washington, D.C. Okay. Now, we're looking at possibly 2024 to recognize those that either didn't qualify for PSOB or were prior to 2019, because those officers still need to be honored and those families' sacrifice needs to be recognized. So we are not saying we're not doing another conference. We're just waiting to see how many will be able to go to National Police Week for that conference. I still have the granite wall where we engraved their names. At that conference, we had it's a movable granite wall. It's about 200 plus pounds, but I transported it across the country to get it to Indy. We did a memorial service, blue light vigil, and then we had a conference for the survivors. And so we're looking at that possibly for 2024. We just kind of got to see what is going to happen with the benefits and the line of duty death status.
That's great information. I want to take just a second and actually talk about Police Week, because you brought it up, Shelley, and maybe just visit a little bit about what an absolutely amazing and honoring time that is for law enforcement. And I know we're talking to a first responder community, and there's a lot of listeners out there. We're not just solely devoted to law enforcement, but Shelley's organization is Shelley organization is devoted to law enforcement. Doesn't mean there's not other hurting people out there, or other firefighters or paramedics that have been lost that need honoring, but specifically to this endeavor of National Police Week. What an amazing and honoring week that is, and heavy. It's a really heavy week of grief and joy and pride and so many emotions to that. Can you want to speak to that just for a little bit?
Yes. National Police Week is put on by basically three major organizations: Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Fund, the FOP and its auxiliary, and Concerns of Police Survivors. COPS puts the portion that they manage is the conference for the survivors, and it's a 2-day conference. And I know that it has a huge impact on those survivors because I've seen it. And at the conference, they have mental health professionals and peer support teams available for the survivors to talk to one-on-one if they want to. And then obviously there's the memorial service on May 15th, which is a very impressive event. And that's put on by the FOP and its auxiliary. And that's where they honor the current year, or the roll call basically for that year at that event. And then the candlelight vigil, they actually do historics, name reading, and the current roll call. and that has grown so big that last I heard that they had moved the location because it was so big. So,
Wow.
and it's just it's a beautiful tribute to the officers and the sacrifice of those families.
And as I understand it now, you're looking at both suicide survivors and line of duty death survivors coming together at National Police Week. That is so great. That's so great to hear.
It is. And, this year there probably won't be a large number because for them to get honored there, they have to be approved for PSOB benefits.
Sure.
So this year,
Right.
and because it's so new, there probably won't be a lot. But I
Sure.
anticipate next year there being a large number of suicide families or suicide survivors there, and it's gonna be amazing for them.
Shelley, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know you're super busy. First, let me just thank you for devoting so much of your life to this mission. You are a true hero for spending so much time, effort, and energy to helping others. You have such a great heart. Good leader, good organizer, but you're a great friend. Thanks for coming on here today.
Thank you for having me because I appreciate you guys taking and recognizing the importance of these families. It's not always been the case, and it's just nice to see we're moving in the direction that they're starting to get recognized. So thank you guys.
No, and I want to thank you too for coming on. I think I got to point it out is this has definitely been one of the heavier episodes that we've had. We've had quite a few just because of the topic. I mean, realistically, that's just the way it goes. And I feel like I have to point out if somebody has made it through this episode, because there's going to be people that have turned it off because it's this subject, right? But if someone has made it through to the end of this episode and this is hitting home with them, right? Like we definitely need to point out that there's tons of options. I mean, you presented a ton. There are people out that will answer the phone. They will pick it up. They will help you through any crisis that you're feeling. If you're retired and you felt that, when we talked about the retiree, if you felt that, there's so many options to get the help. And so I just want there to be I want to make a point of saying, hey, people understand. People like Shelley, people like Brad, they understand where you are, and they're willing to have a conversation with you at any time of the day, any time of the week, and help. Am I off by saying that?
You're absolutely correct. It's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to ask for help. And we encourage you to ask for help. And you can call the cops office and they'll transfer your call to me. It's 573-346-4911. And they'll transfer you to me, or you can go to survivorsofbluesuicide.org and click on the email, and you can send me an email. And I will reach out and we will find you somebody to talk to, because that's what's important.
One last time as we kind of close up, Shelley, a final kind of where do we find you? Do you have, you've talked about the website, survivorsofbluesuicide.org, Concerns of Police Survivors. Do you have social media? We're going to put your email, Austin's going to put your email up, I think is what he said. Social media find, anything like that you want to plug here?
Yes, we have a Facebook account, Survivors of Blue Suicide. Just look for our logo, and we also have a Instagram account, and you can connect with us through Messenger on either one of those accounts. I think I'm on LinkedIn. Survivors of Blue Suicide is on LinkedIn. You can reach us through the LinkedIn. So there's multiple ways to reach us.
Plenty of ways to plug in and find out the great work that Survivors of Blue Suicide is doing out here across the nation. Shelley Jones, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you guys for having me.